What could make a person inflict more than 90 wounds on a victim? Rage, revenge, or the fear of exposure? The story of Miriam Vallejo is a case where all the clues point to one person, but there is not enough evidence for a conviction. The investigation has been ongoing for 6 years. The killer is at large. To radically change your life, you have to leave your comfort zone and work hard toward your goals. But not everyone is destined to live to the moment when their dreams come true. Some die halfway there. On August 9, 1993, Miriam Vallejo was born in the capital of Spain. The only child in her family, she grew up in an atmosphere of care and love. From a young age, she showed incredible tenderness toward animals. She couldn't walk past a stray cat or dog without stopping to feed it. Kindness and a warm attitude toward others became her main qualities. As a schoolgirl, she dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Her parents noticed how she spent hours with the neighbors' animals, how her eyes lit up at the sight of any mutt. But over time, her plans changed. After high school, she chose a medical field in college, qualified as a junior medical staff member, and then took a course in administrative management. Her first job was as a lab assistant in a pharmaceutical firm. Later, she changed jobs and rose to head of the sales department for computer equipment. The young woman earned actively, striving for financial independence. Her superiors and colleagues described her as a responsible person dedicated to her work. Miriam was always distinguished by her determination. She understood perfectly well that desires don't come true without hard work. She arrived earlier than everyone else and left later. She took extra shifts. She saved every euro. Until she finished college, she lived under her parents' roof, but now she felt the need for independence. One of the incentives was her 2 large dogs. She wanted a spacious home where she could live comfortably with her animals. Miriam dreamed of a large house with a yard, preferably outside the city, where the animals could roam free. She imagined the morning, opening the door, the dogs running out into the yard, no complaints from neighbors, no cramped spaces. Of course, buying real estate required money, which she didn't have enough of yet. But the young woman was not one to sit idly by. The solution was to rent a house with her friend Celia. This way, they both saved money and finally gained independence from their parents. The house was spacious and open, though the company was not just 2 people. Celia's boyfriend, Sergio, joined the venture. The young people had met at a battery factory where they were both employees. He was an equipment maintenance technician, and she worked in the laboratory. Miriam barely knew him. She had met him a couple of times when Celia brought her boyfriend over. An ordinary couple, nothing special. The trio found a suitable option and soon moved to Villanueva de la Torre, a provincial town with abundant agricultural land and industrial enterprises on its outskirts. They chose a quiet, safe neighborhood with a low crime rate and a small local population. Here, everyone knew each other by sight. Cars drove slowly. In the evenings, people walked their dogs and greeted their neighbors. Gradually, the residents began to settle into their new place. Miriam immediately appreciated the move. She was especially happy about the spacious grounds and vacant lots where she could take her beloved pets for long walks. She would go out in the evenings with 4 dogs, 2 of hers, 2 of Celia's, and wander along the edge of the residential area, where the houses ended and the thickets began. It was here, on January 16, 2019, that a young neighboring couple was taking a walk. The evening was cold and quiet. In the bushes, far from the paths, they discovered a young woman, drenched in blood. The witnesses immediately called an ambulance and urged them to hurry. The victim was showing signs of life. She was breathing, moving. Unfortunately, by the time the paramedics arrived, there was no one left to save. The blood had stopped pulsing, the body had grown cold. The victim was quickly identified by the local residents who had gathered. 25-year-old Miriam Vallejo had moved into the house just a few months ago and hadn't had time to meet everyone yet. But many had seen her regularly walking her dogs in the vacant lots, so they recognized her immediately. Tall, dark hair, always in a hat and scarf, always with 4 animals. The young woman died from multiple stab wounds. The blows were concentrated in the chest, neck, back, sides, and arms, clear signs of a desperate struggle. Blood soaked her clothes, the ground around her, and the leaves. Detectives found the victim's address and immediately went to her housemates. They needed to reconstruct Miriam's last hours and the events of the evening. As it turned out, around 8:30 p.m., she had gone out to walk her pets. She had 2 of her own large breed dogs, plus 2 more that belonged to her housemate Celia. Celia herself had just returned from a trip to another city shortly before the police arrived and had no idea about the tragedy. However, while still on the road, she grew concerned that her friend wasn't answering her calls. Celia dialed once, a second time, a third. It went to voicemail, then just ringing. Meanwhile, none of the 4 animals were at home. Incidentally, the dogs were calmly waiting for Celia to retrieve them. They remained near the victim's body, right at the crime scene. They sat in the grass, not barking, not whining, just waiting. The police immediately questioned several witnesses in the vacant lot. It turned out to be a group of neighbors who were also walking their dogs in the area. They all said they had seen Miriam. She had been walking with them for some time, about 10 to 15 minutes before she sustained the fatal wounds. The interaction was calm. Nothing suggested trouble. The young woman was in a good mood. She was smiling, joking about one of the dogs that didn't want to go home. But soon she separated from the group of dog walkers and headed toward the vacant lot where her body was later found. According to testimony, she was attacked almost immediately after she went out of sight. Between the conversation and her death, a matter of minutes. Considering the timeline reconstructed by investigators, the attack occurred just 20 minutes after Miriam left the house. 10 minutes later, her body was found. Yet no one saw the attacker. No one heard any screams. Silence. An immediate search yielded no results. Even bringing in police officers with service dogs didn't help. The trail went cold at the edge of the vacant lot, then was lost among the residential buildings. Investigators tried to determine a motive. Rape was ruled out. No signs of a sexual nature were found. Her clothes were in place, fastened. Robbery was also ruled out, All the valuables the young woman had taken on her walk were still with her. Her mobile phone, money, and jewelry. Even the earrings in her ears. Yet the attack was exceptionally brutal. So much so that investigators suspected a personal motive. The killer must have known the victim well. There was some kind of emotional connection between them, possibly hatred or resentment. Such a number of blows is not just murder, it's rage. This theory was confirmed by the forensic examination. Miriam was found to have over 90 stab wounds. The expert counted slowly, recording each one. 92 blows. Moreover, the perpetrator used 2 different bladed weapons. Neither knife was found at the scene. Most of the injuries were superficial. The first blows were to the back and abdomen. According to the police, this indicated a surprise attack from behind. Furthermore, the killer was not particularly strong physically. The wounds were shallow, as if inflicted by someone who couldn't put their full force into it. 8 stab wounds were located in the kidney area. The forensic expert stated they could have caused fatal bleeding. Another potentially lethal injury was found in the chest area. The perpetrator had pierced the victim's heart. This blow was precise, deep, the final one. According to criminologists' estimates, the attack lasted at least 10 minutes, a rather long period, considering that people with dogs must have been nearby. They should have noticed or heard something. It seemed strange that this didn't happen. At least none of those present at the scene of the murder could provide valuable information. Everyone said the same thing. They heard nothing, saw nothing. It was obvious that the perpetrator was also injured during the struggle. Miriam had 2 broken fingernails. Her hands had numerous cuts and bruises. She had resisted, scratched, and tried to push the attacker away. The strangest thing for investigators was the fact that the 4 large dogs accompanying the victim did not react to the perpetrator in any way. They didn't bark, didn't try to protect Miriam. They just stood nearby and watched. This confirmed the suspicion that the victim and the killer knew each other. The animals probably knew him too. This meant the attacker saw the deceased regularly, perhaps lived nearby. He had been in the house, said hello, petted the dogs. Then detectives checked the victim's mobile phone and found that someone had deleted information from it, presumably after the attack. The exact time could not be determined. Messages were erased, calls were deleted. Someone was painstakingly covering their tracks. Given the circumstances, the initial suspect was a female. These suspicions arose because most of the wounds were shallow. They were likely inflicted by a person with limited physical strength. The number of wounds could have a female imprint, motivated by jealousy, envy, or revenge. Besides, women in a rage sometimes control themselves far worse than men. 92 blows. That's not calculated. That's a loss of control. On this basis, detectives began to analyze the victim's immediate circle, hoping to find a lead. Perhaps she was involved in a love triangle, or had a serious conflict with someone recently. Since the group of 3 had moved there recently, her friend Celia was initially under suspicion. When rumors of a female killer began to spread, she received a lot of negativity. This only intensified the pain of losing her best friend. Neighbors gave her strange looks. People wrote nasty things online. Celia stopped going outside. Nevertheless, Celia denied any involvement in the murder. The Vallejo family also didn't believe she was guilty. The girls had been close friends for too long. They had known Celia since she was a teenager and had seen how much she loved Miriam. Celia managed to prove her innocence with an alibi. But even after law enforcement officers removed her from the list of suspects, the attacks from local residents continued. The entire concerned internet joined in, and the rumors spread by journalists only fueled the conflict. Celia complained of harassment and threats online. Someone sent her private messages. Someone called and stayed silent. She changed her number, but the threats found her again. At the same time, she actively cooperated with detectives. She sincerely wanted to help the investigation catch the perpetrator. She was convinced that a stranger had attacked her friend. The housemaid based this on the fact that there were no problematic individuals in their immediate circle. Miriam herself was non-confrontational and strictly avoided aggressive people, individuals with criminal records, or those from the criminal world. She generally tried to steer clear of any conflicts. At work, she would stay quiet when others argued. At home, she would go to her room if Sergio and Celia were fighting. Against this backdrop, they returned to the theory of an attack motivated by rape. Investigators suggested that the perpetrator might have been scared off, so he didn't manage to carry out his plan. However, no evidence for this motive could be found. Her clothes were fastened, no traces. Several people from Miriam's inner circle mentioned her ex-boyfriend. Nevertheless, this young man was not aggressive or hot-tempered. He was quickly ruled out as a suspect. First, their relationship had ended a long time ago. The breakup had occurred without any stalking or alarming signals. They simply went their separate ways peacefully and didn't bother each other anymore. Sometimes they would meet on the street, say hello, and move on. No drama. Second, the boyfriend lived in Madrid near the Vallejo family and provided a confirmed alibi that cleared him of all suspicion. On the evening of the murder, he was at work, then at a bar with friends. Dozens of witnesses, security camera footage. Then they began to work on the theory that the killer actually wanted to murder Celia, but mistakenly killed the other housemate, Miriam. The young women did indeed look alike in terms of hair color, build, and height. They took turns walking the dogs. This theory was indirectly supported by the fact that the victim was wearing clothing that covered her face enough, including a hat and scarf. It would have been easy to mistake them, especially since both periodically walked each other's dogs. In the dark, in a vacant lot, with 4 animals, who could tell them apart? However, this theory also proved untenable. The victim's best friend was not being harassed by anyone either. She had no problematic ex-partners or other conflicts. Celia lived a quiet life, worked, and dated Sergio. No drama. In the end, detectives questioned more than 100 people of interest to the investigation. But they all had confirmed alibis and were gradually removed from the list of suspects. Most of them willingly cooperated with the investigation. They voluntarily provided DNA samples for analysis. They opened their doors, answered questions, showed their phones. A thorough questioning of the victim's inner circle also showed a lack of suspects. The circle was narrowing. So they focused on investigating the two people who were closest to Miriam during this period. Naturally, these were Celia and her boyfriend, Sergio, with whom she lived. But even a second check on Celia showed that she had a solid alibi. She couldn't have been the killer. On the evening of the attack on Miriam, she was more than 20 kilometers away from the crime scene. Dozens of witnesses were found to confirm this, as well as video recordings and photographs. Just in case, they checked her mobile phone's geolocation and footage from surveillance cameras. All of this only confirmed the housemate's words. Celia was in another city, visiting relatives, sitting at a table, having dinner, laughing. At that time, her friend was bleeding to death in a vacant lot. Celia was definitively removed from the list of suspects. But the situation with her boyfriend, Sergio, was different. Suspicions against him began to be indirectly confirmed when it was discovered that from the moment Miriam met Sergio, their relationship had been tense. The young woman had even complained to Celia that she didn't feel safe around her boyfriend. They would periodically have short verbal altercations, but her friend managed to calm them both down, reminding them that they were all paying rent for the house together. Celia would get between them, spread her hands and say, "Let's not do this. We have to live here together." According to Celia, the atmosphere was tense for a while after the move, but then everything returned to normal. She even knew that Sergio had helped Miriam settle into the house, installing a TV antenna and moving heavy boxes. On the surface, everything had smoothed over. She herself categorically did not believe that her boyfriend could be involved in the attack and murder, especially one involving nearly 100 stab wounds. This was her boyfriend. They slept in the same bed and planned a future together. How was that possible? However, detectives were not satisfied with the alibi Sergio provided. According to him, between 8:30 and 9 p.m., he was playing video games on his PlayStation console. He was at home, alone, with no one around. However, this fact could be checked, so detectives immediately examined the console. The young man's story turned out to be true. The PlayStation was indeed on during the specified time frame. After that, the young man was released, and they continued their work. Nevertheless, they didn't completely write him off. Something didn't feel right. Only 3 days passed when a curious incident occurred. Suddenly, Sergio decided to break up with Celia and left the house they were renting together. This seemed strange to everyone, including the young woman herself. He packed his things, didn't explain the reason, and just left. It later turned out that Celia had been sharing her feelings with friends and family. She never understood the reason for the breakup. It all happened too abruptly and unexpectedly. From the outside, it seemed they continued to maintain normal communication, as they saw each other regularly at work. But their personal lives had changed drastically. They would say hello, exchange a few words by their workstations, and go their separate ways. No intimacy. When the victim's body was laid to rest, about 500 people were present at the ceremony. Among them was Sergio, who was being watched closely. It turned out he hadn't come to express his condolences to the Vallejo family. He behaved strangely. Most of the time, he was in a remote room or outside, just chain-smoking, lighting a new cigarette from the old one, looking away. He wasn't just avoiding people. He was wearing a long coat, a hat, and sunglasses, as if trying to hide his identity, indoors, in January. Despite his precautions, everyone recognized him, and some even noticed scratches on Sergio's nose. He had similar ones on his hands, fresh, red, not yet healed. He explained them away as a minor safety violation at work, where he got injured on some equipment. But it all looked very suspicious. The scratches were parallel, as if someone had dragged their nails across his skin. Investigators worked for 7 months without any significant breakthroughs, but on August 13, 2019, the first arrest was made in the Miriam Vallejo case. By this time, Sergio had turned 29. He was the most suitable person on the list of suspects. Curiously, the young man's friends and family did not believe he was capable of such an act. He was described as a very calm and reasonable young man who was into video games and loved fishing. He was far from the world of crime and violence, a quiet guy, an introvert. Even his lack of a criminal record did not convince law enforcement that they had the wrong person. Sergio was arrested at his parents' house. He had moved there immediately after the murder and his breakup with Celia. During a search of his room, they confiscated a computer and other electronics, several mobile phones, his car, and clothes. The most curious find was a machete he kept in his closet, a long, heavy blade in a sheath. All of this was to be examined by forensic experts. Sergio continued to deny involvement in the murder, but investigators had no doubt about his guilt. Everything fit: motive, opportunity, behavior after the crime. Detectives were working on 2 main theories. The first suggested a desire to have an intimate relationship with Miriam, which she rejected, provoking Sergio to attack her. The second option seemed even more likely. It implied that Miriam had discovered Sergio's infidelity and was going to tell Celia about it. The young man couldn't let that happen, so he attacked and killed her. It was easier to kill her than to lose his relationship. The reason for the growing suspicion against him was a more thorough analysis of the young man's game console. Although it was indeed turned on during the period he specified, and when the young woman died, the controller was not actually used the whole time. No one was playing the game. The character was standing still, not moving. It was suggested that the killer deliberately left the console on to create his alibi, but in reality, he used that time to murder his housemate. He turned on the console, left the house, came back, and turned it off. Simple. During the forensic examination, traces of DNA matching Sergio's profile were found on the victim's clothing. Investigators were convinced that these traces were left when he attacked her from behind. Presumably, he held her by the neck with one hand while striking her with the other, before she managed to break free and fight back. Miriam fought. She scratched. She might have screamed, but no one heard. Naturally, Sergio's lawyer argued that this was an accidental transfer of DNA samples. Since the whole group lived together, they periodically touched each other, used the same objects, did their laundry, and touched each other's clothes. The young man's DNA could easily have ended up on any item of the victim's wardrobe. They lived under the same roof. It's natural. However, cigarette butts with Sergio's DNA samples were found near the girl's body, which seemed like quite convincing evidence. 4 cigarette butts, all recent, all his. But the lawyer tried to contest this evidence as well, stating that they had been there earlier, when Sergio had been walking the dogs and smoking on previous days. Maybe the day before, maybe a week ago. Who knows? All this sounded unconvincing, but the judge took it as a valid argument. Detectives were sure that the confiscated machete was the murder weapon, but the owner denied it. According to the young man, he kept it in memory of his grandfather, who had died of old age. He used it only for fishing and as a tool on camping trips. His grandfather had taught him how to clean fish with that blade, a family heirloom. The examination confirmed that the machete was not used during the murder. There was no blood on the blade, no microparticles of fabric, nothing. At the preliminary hearings, the lawyer tried to convince the court that Sergio was not dangerous. For 7 months after Miriam's murder, he had indeed led a completely normal life, even communicating with the victim's family to offer them support. Before the tragedy, the young man had no problems with the law, not a single conviction, not a single fine. Despite this, the judge decided he should be held in custody without bail while the trial was ongoing. Too many coincidences. Then, messages between Sergio, his brother, and Celia came to the investigators' attention. The young woman once again aroused suspicion. She called her ex-boyfriend a scoundrel and a psychopath. She wrote this in messages and said it out loud. This led to the suggestion that she might have known more about her friend's death than she was actually saying. Maybe she suspected. Maybe she saw something. However, further checks did not confirm this. Celia attributed her anger to the fact that she couldn't imagine her boyfriend would take her best friend away from her. During Sergio's arrest, she couldn't contain her emotions, so she wished for his death in prison. Let him die there. Let him rot. Then Celia spoke to the police again and revealed that she had learned about her boyfriend's numerous infidelities. She also found out that he was using illegal substances. She hadn't mentioned this before because she didn't want to worsen his situation, but now she was sure that he was the culprit. Now she didn't care. Let them know everything. While examining the suspect's mobile phone, it was discovered that on the evening Celia left the house, he was messaging another girl. This led to the assumption that he was having an intimate relationship with her, or meeting her at the house while his girlfriend and Miriam were away. However, when his housemate returned home and caught him, she decided to tell Celia everything. This became the motive to get rid of her friend. Miriam knew too much. When the cheating became public knowledge, the young woman spoke to detectives again. Celia remembered some important details. For some reason, Sergio had burned personal belongings within days of the murder. According to her, he even destroyed a whole set of clothes. Now she understood. Those were the clothes the young man was wearing at the time of Miriam's murder. What was the point of just burning normal clothes? He built a fire in the backyard, threw a jacket, jeans, and a t-shirt into it. He watched them burn. It seemed he did it deliberately to get rid of evidence. Sergio himself denied everything and believed that his ex was just trying to get revenge on him for the cheating and the breakup. "She's making it up. She's lying. She wants to see me behind bars." The young woman's most compromising statement came later. While talking to Sergio's brother, Celia said that the knives he used for the murder were buried somewhere near the house. They're there, in the ground, waiting. When the police talked to the young woman about these statements, it turned out she had consulted a psychic and was now basing her testimony on his words. She herself didn't know what kind of knives they were or exactly where they were buried. She just believed. She wanted to believe. Unfortunately, Celia's statements were unfounded and checks failed to confirm them. Because of this, they had no impact on the investigation. No knives were found near the house. They dug and checked with metal detectors. Nothing. On September 20, 2019, it was decided to keep Sergio in pre-trial detention. A decision that underscored the lack of strong evidence against the young man. He was behind bars for a total of 4 months. Solitary confinement, interrogations, waiting. Suddenly, he was released on December 20, 2019. Checks of the items confiscated from the house where he lived with his parents failed to find any traces of DNA related to the deceased. Nothing on his clothes, nothing on his shoes, nothing in his car. Sergio was released, but his passport was confiscated, and he was required to report to the court weekly to check in. Every Monday, 10 in the morning, no being late. Then, detectives tried to obtain more evidence to link the killer to the crime, but in vain. The case stalled. In December 2020, the investigation took an unexpected turn. In the middle of the month, a young man named Alberto Bersosa was admitted to a rehabilitation center in Madrid. He was in a state of severe intoxication and began to recount details of the death of a young woman he called Miriam. He provided various details that caught the attention of the police. He named the place, time, and details that had not been published in the press. The young man himself had been convicted of assault in 2019. He had tried to run someone over with a car under his mother's windows. This is how he ended up in the same cell as Sergio, where Sergio allegedly confessed to him about killing his housemate. At night, in the dark, when the guards had left. According to Alberto, all the information he was voicing had been told to him by his cellmate during his incarceration. However, his testimony was highly inconsistent with the facts of the case, so it sounded unconvincing. He mixed up dates, places, and the number of blows. Then Alberto even confessed to the attack on Miriam himself. "It was me. I killed her. I'm sorry." Ultimately, checks showed that Alberto himself was not involved, and his stories were of little value to the investigation. His DNA samples were not found on the victim's body or at the crime scene, and the man also had a confirmed alibi. He was in another city, in a hospital, after an overdose. For Miriam's family, all of this was another shock. They continued to hope for justice for their daughter. Her mother wouldn't leave the house, her father aged 10 years. By January 2023, the judge handling the case stated that there was not enough evidence to hold anyone accountable. Despite the suspicions against Sergio remaining, it was clear that the material was insufficient to press formal charges, so the criminal prosecution against him was dropped. The case was closed. The man's lawyer immediately stated that his client would be seeking compensation for damages. He claimed that the arrests and precautionary measures taken by the authorities had a strong negative impact on the young man's life. Sergio had a falling out with almost all his friends. His reputation was irreparably damaged. Threats and insults against him continued. People would cross to the other side of the street when they saw him. The biggest blow for him was the death of his father. The man had been suffering from cancer, but was managing the illness until an exacerbation occurred that he couldn't survive. His son believed it was directly related to the stress from Sergio's arrest. His father couldn't bear the shame, couldn't bear the rumors. In addition, the young man demanded the return of all property that had been confiscated from the house, including the machete, car, and clothes. According to the lawyer, his client intended to claim moral damages of at least 300,000 euros for the pain, for the humiliation, for the lost time. Then the Vallejo family received another blow when they were informed the case was closed. Now they were the ones who began to complain and try to get the stalled wheels of justice moving again. They wrote petitions, appealed to the media, and hired private investigators. Despite the case simply being closed, the victim's family continued to put pressure on law enforcement agencies. In July 2025, it was decided to reopen the investigation. The reason was that a new witness had come forward who claimed that more than one person might have been involved in the attack on Miriam. The witness, whose name was not disclosed, stated that they had heard voices in the silence from the direction where the body was later found. A male voice, maybe two. They were shouting, arguing, then fell silent. This could explain why two types of bladed weapons were used and why the victim received such varied and numerous injuries in a short period, one attacking from the right, the other from the left. One holding, the other cutting. After this, a reconstruction was carried out to re-establish the timeline of events. It showed that two attackers fit well with the circumstances of the murder, confirmed by the evidence. This allowed for a new direction in the investigation. The fact is, if Sergio wasn't the killer, catching the culprit required a completely new approach. They needed to start from scratch. Finally, Miriam's family had new hope. However, the case remains unsolved to this day. The work continues. The investigation is not yet over, but the prosecutor's office asserts that the killer or killers will not be able to escape their deserved punishment under any circumstances. We will find them, sooner or later. Many believe that Sergio is behind Miriam's murder. After all, some of the evidence points directly to him. His DNA samples were found on the victim's clothing at the crime scene. The young man had a motive to get rid of his housemate, who had exposed his infidelity.
They had a tense relationship. Scratches were seen on his face and body. Moreover, the young man has no alibi. He lied about it, which already undermines the credibility of his words. Also, Sergio was well known to the dogs, who would not have attacked him. They knew his scent, his voice, his touch. He knew his housemate had gone for a walk and could have approached Miriam unnoticed, where he attacked her without witnesses, and then burned his clothes, as Celia later recounted. He returned home, turned on the PlayStation, and pretended nothing had happened. Nevertheless, he is not currently considered a suspect. He is free. He walks the same streets where Miriam used to walk. Could Sergio have done it? After all, everything points to him, and he just got away with it. Or, in this situation, did he become a victim of a random combination of circumstances? An unfortunate coincidence. A bad alibi. The wrong time, in the wrong place.